Hey everyone, James Reeves with TFBTV. Huge announcement today, which should be October 25th, unless the gun leaked, because they typically always do, and it might be a little bit earlier than that, but hopefully it's October 25th, and Springfield Armory is announcing the SA-35, which is Springfield's take on the Hi-Power. There's probably going to be a lot of videos dropping about it today, and you buttholes out there absolutely lose your minds, and you're like, oh, they're all shills, they're all on the payroll. And yeah, some YouTubers are well, most YouTubers are indeed shills, but just because everybody's releasing a video at the same day, all that means is the press embargo ran. Like, we've been reviewing these for several weeks, but we weren't allowed to talk about it until today. So let's talk about this new gun. Well, really not that new, right? This new old gun. While I haven't personally owned an FN Hi-Power for over 10 years, I've got a lot of respect for the BHP. It's one of the most popular handguns of all time, and perhaps the original Wonder 9. After 82 years of continuous production, including several years under Nazi control after being seized by the Germans in World War II, FN discontinued the Hi-Power in 2018. The Hi-Power was everything the 1911 should have been. High capacity, reliable, soft recoiling, while being durable and handsome. In essence, it was a bit of a ripoff of the 1911, having been designed around the 1911 after Colt's patent expired in the late 1920s. As I've said in prior videos, it's not necessity, but government contract. That's the real mother of invention. Or in this instance, less invention and more legalized intellectual property theft. Shortly following its first century of complete military irrelevance, the French, LOL, wanted a new pistol. Surprisingly, for the 1920s, this shit was badass. The French requirement said that they wanted a hammer-fired pistol that held at least 10 rounds of 9mm at a minimum, a round that could go at least 350 meters a second, that is 1,150 feet per second, and a gun lighter than 1 kilogram, which right there disqualifies the 1911. And it has to be easy to field strip without tools. Oh yeah, and it's got to be able to kill a man at 50 yards. That last part could totally have gone unsaid in view of the ballistics requirement, but I love the redundant homicidal energy that the French are coming with here. The French called this solicitation for the new pistol something in French, I wrote it down. I got it right here. The Grandi Puissance. So we'll leave the history lesson at that, because there are a ton of videos about this revered gun, but the Hi-Power story is worth a read. And unlike the 1911, the Hi-Power remains relevant even today. The Hi-Power itself, licensed clones or unlicensed clones, have been the official sidearm for the armed forces of over 90 countries. It's still in service with around 50 militaries around the world. You know, I try to bring you all something a little bit different than what you're going to get with the 27 other videos about this gun that are all going to launch today at the same time. So we're going to look at a really neat comparative study done by the Australian Army in 2015, comparing the Hi-Power against 4 polymer frame competitors from HK, Glock, Steyr, Smith & Wesson. We're going to circle back to that report later in the video. So you clicked on the video because you saw the big news. The Hi-Power is coming back, and from all places, Springfield Armory is remaking it. The version is going to be called the SA-35 as an homage to the original Hi-Power being called the P-35, based on its year of introduction. I think I've been pretty critical of some of Springfield's pistols in the past, and I own no Springfield Armory firearms. Springfield makes a great 1911. I'm just not a 1911 guy, but every now and again, Springfield will turn out an absolute banger. The Springfield Waypoint is probably one of the best bolt actions on the market. I absolutely love it. And even though I'm not too keen on 1911s, the EMP is a fantastic 1911 for carry. And now Springfield Armory goes and does this. The Hi-Power. I would argue that the Hi-Power might be the best handgun that they've ever made. And if you want a really hot take, I would also argue that Springfield's version, the SA-35, is not just as good as FN's, but it seems to me like it's substantially better. I'm about to freak you out with those details, but if you just want to turn this video off right now, I'll say that if you have any interest in owning a Hi-Power whatsoever, I think you should just go ahead and buy this one and thank me later. I know you FN guys are seething right now, but we're going to start with the specs, and then I'll go ahead and buttress the controversial statements I just made. Springfield Armory's version of the Hi-Power is relatively faithful to the original, although they do use more sophisticated manufacturing techniques and materials than the original deal, and there are a couple of changes we'll talk about. It's a 9mm single action only double stack semi-automatic handgun. Unlike the original Hi-Power, which had a 13-round capacity with flush fit magazines, the Springfield holds 15+1 rounds with a flush fit magazine. That isn't because of any design difference with the Springfield version. They're just using updated magazines that hold 15 rounds that would also work in any other Hi-Power. That likely answers a big question you have, though, which is about magazine compatibility, and the answer is yes. The Hi-Power is compatible with legacy magazines. As I'll discuss in greater detail in a moment, it's also compatible with a great deal of legacy Hi-Power components, parts, and accessories. Now I need to justify my controversial position that the Springfield version is better than the original. Big claim, right? Springfield actually spent a hell of a lot of time working on this SA-35, perfecting it. They wanted to make sure their remaster of the Hi-Power was good. I've known about this project for, I want to say, about a year now, maybe even longer. They took the job seriously, and it shows. First of all, the Achilles heel of the original Hi-Power was that the magazine disconnect safety made the trigger so-so. And this was a requirement of the initial French military solicitation from the 1920s. It just never went away. It was like a big Gallic albatross around the Hi-Power's neck. Springfield's wisely eliminated this feature, and the trigger's fantastic. It's not nearly as good as Springfield's 1911s, of course, but it's still excellent by any measure with a nice 5.5 pound trigger pull. The reset's not as swift as I would like, and that might be my chief complaint here, but it's head and shoulders better than the original, and that's what I'm saying. Second, hammer geometry was tweaked a little bit. The original Hi-Power was prone to give some shooters slide bite, so Springfield easily addressed the issue just by kind of tweaking and recontouring the hammer geometry just a bit. No one shooting this gun at St. Bernard Indoor Shooting Center experienced any slide bite whatsoever, including myself, so mission accomplished, I guess. Third, there are more modern and sophisticated manufacturing techniques employed with the construction of the SA-35. The frame and the slide are forged in CNC machined steel instead of cast. The barrel's hammer forged and it's high polished. This means that the barrel should be more durable and probably more accurate than the original FN Hi-Power. Fourth, it comes with 15-round magazines made by Metguard that are flush fit, not the standard 13-round magazines. Fifth, it also comes with really good sights right out of the box, we'll talk about in a second. But speaking of compatibility, Springfield says that they're confident that most, possibly all major components of prior iterations of the Hi-Power will work in their version. They did this deliberately. They do caution that their rendition has much tighter tolerances than the original. Considering it's CNC machined and built for accuracy while offering better reliability than the original, that's okay. More on accuracy and reliability in just a moment. This version also has a slightly larger safety and a little bit different design than the original, making it more shooter friendly. In the same theme, Springfield's version has a slightly beveled magazine well to assist with magazine insertions, which is an awesome feature. Fit and finish is wild. Springfield did a great job with the aesthetics. Just like the original Hi-Power, the markings are understated and the gun is elegant. No grip zone on there, if you know what I mean. The walnut grips have perfect checkering and contrast very well with the almost matte black bluing that Springfield uses on this Hi-Power. It looks great. Again, the slide in the frame, CNC machine, forged steel, which is about as good as it gets, and definitely superior to other versions of the Hi-Power that would use any cast components. The barrel is a high polished stainless. It provides great accuracy and cycling reliability while complementing the understated aesthetic of the pistol. If you're familiar with Springfield's higher end 1911s, the manufacturing process and the materials are going to be similar, if not identical. But enough about all that shit. How does it shoot? That's what you really want to know, right? Good news is it shoots about as good as it looks. And as you might imagine, for an all-metal gun weighing 32 ounces, it's a pussycat with 9mm. Recoil's very soft, follow-up shots are easy. The magazine release is easy to get to. The new beveled magazine well makes mag changes smooth. Some shooters had issues accidentally engaging the slide stop. The slide stop used by this version of the Hi-Power is unsurprisingly identical to the original. That makes it less than optimal, and the location isn't that great, but this is a minor complaint considering the massive job Springfield's done with this gun. And technically, it's not really Springfield's fault as much as it is John Browning's, am I right? Talking about accuracy, I put 10 rounds in one hole at 7 yards. 10 round group at 7 yards. Only got one little flyer, but all these guys touching. Well, almost. I mean, like 9 rounds in one hole, and one that was just like a half or a quarter inch off, like a flyer. Probably the wind is what happened. And I love the new sights. The new, more modern sights use the serrated and blacked out rear notch. They're easy to pick up, but they also don't look out of character. We took a little informal poll after we shot the gun at St. Bernard, asked the entire gang, how much do you think this thing is gonna cost? All of the guesses were around $699 or $799, and it turns out we know our stuff. This version of the Hi-Power is going to be $699 MSRP, and for what you're getting, I think this is an absolute bargain. For an all-steel high-end pistol, $699 is a good deal no matter what gun it is. But this MSRP also means $699. It could be in like the mid-low 600 street price. So I think that that's an absolute bargain for what you're getting here. So let's talk about the cons. But this is more specific to the Hi-Power in general, not Springfield's excellent facsimile of it. Remember that Austrian military study we talked about earlier in the video? We're getting back to that now. In 2015, the Australian Army Journal evaluated the Hi-Power for the Army of Tomorrow, their words. The Aussies still issue the Hi-Power, and this journal piece revisited that decision and whether it was a good one. They compared the current issue Hi-Power Mark III to the HK USP, to the Smith & Wesson M&P, the Steyr M9, and God's favorite gun, the Glock 19. Using a mixed group of 19 novice and experienced pistol handlers, the Australian military tested the speed and accuracy of each pistol under different tests, and the order each shooter fired each gun was randomized to avoid what they call practice bias. Interestingly, while also kind of bullshit, the M&P and the Glock were equipped with red dot optics. Even with that advantage in the hands of experienced shooters, the Hi-Power was the most accurate pistol. Novices shot the red dot equipped Glock 19 better, but the groups from the Hi-Power without a red dot were only about 10% larger than the Glock 19. Basically, the Hi-Power was first or second place in every category, and while it was 25% slower than the USP on a plate rack for speed testing, it was still tied for second place in the speed testing. Notwithstanding the fact that the Hi-Power was maybe the best performing pistol in these tests, depending on how you look at it, and definitely the best performer without a red dot, this journal article still took a big steamy dump on the Hi-Power, concluding that the Browning has been well and truly surpassed, and said that replacing it was a moral imperative. Like, holy shit, did these dudes just say that the government was immoral for using their pistol that aced their own fucking tests? Now, I'm not going to completely disagree. I think the conclusion's a little bit over the top, but notwithstanding the excellent performance of the Hi-Power, the study points out a few shortcomings. One, that the Hi-Power has a 13-round capacity. That's kind of a bullshit argument because modern Hi-Power mags hold 15 rounds, which is comparable with most service pistols, except for like, full-size service pistols like the 17+1 Glock 17. They point out the lack of a rail. Fair. And another thing they point out is that the Hi-Power, this is the big one, it weighs and costs twice as much as any of its polymer competitors. I mean, look, if they put those 5 guns out and said you had to carry one of them, the Hi-Power probably would be my last choice. But I'm not also willing to say that the 50-plus governments using this very capable handgun are literally murdering their own soldiers because they're not using like the newest polymer frame handgun. It seems like the Hi-Power can hold its own. And on that note, let us conclude. I think that this is possibly the best handgun that Springfield's ever made, and at a $699 MSRP for what you get, it's a steal. Minor caveat, I don't know a ton about Hi-Powers, but I still could not help but be impressed with the SA-35. I think it's better made and definitely better shooting than the original FN Hi-Power that I had like 10, 15 years ago, and it's better looking to boot. Now, John Browning is probably rolling over in his grave about FN discontinuing his gun in 2018, and now he's got to be spinning like he's got hot brass in his shorts after Springfield Armory, of all companies, comes around and outdoes the original. Wow. Good job, Springfield, and good job, you guys. You picked a great channel to watch. I'm sure there's 20 some odd videos on this exact subject today, but you're here watching TFBTV, and that means a lot to me. It also means a lot to me when you guys support us. You're supporting the entire firearm blog when you're contributing to Patreon or Subscribestar. We have accounts at both places. That money just doesn't get stuffed into my pockets. We use that to float the entire firearm blog. So your contributions are appreciated. We also give away 4 guns a month. You're automatically entered if you're at the $5 or the $10 level on Patreon, so that's a neat little perk. Plus you get exclusive content. Please check that out. But if you have any questions, let me know what you think. Just tell me in the comments. I want to know what you guys think of this new gun. Is it as awesome as I think it is? Thanks again for watching and take care.